Welcome to Now Serving a Side of Therapy, your intro guide into the therapeutic world. Together, we'll explore various aspects around how to show up for ourselves and others by tending to our own mental and emotional well-being. I'm your host, Dalton Huckabee, a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I'm grateful you've joined me. To this week's episode of Now Serving a Side of Therapy, a client's introductory guide into the therapeutic world. This week, we are joined by Shivvy Singh, who is an associate professional clinical counselor dedicated to guiding kids and families through the depths of severe traumas, anxiety, and life's pivotal developmental challenges. His innovative multi-modality approach weaves together play therapy, comedy therapy, cognitive behavioral techniques, mindfulness, and creating transformative spaces where children can freely express themselves and forge lasting resilience. Shivvy is committed to empowering parents with proven, actionable strategies to champion their child's mental health in everyday life. Today, we'll explore all of this and some of his insights as they profoundly shape the young lives for the better. And so welcome to this week's episode of the podcast. Shivvy, I'm just going to call you Shivvy moving forward.
Yeah.
That's okay?
Yeah, sounds good.
Sweet. Awesome. Dude, I can't tell you when we were talking about
Uh-huh.
kind of like this unique approach, this multi-modality approach, right, that you have in working with your clients, sounds like a large caseload with children, right, and families. And we've even recently received word that we might be able even to work with families in this kind of more hands-on approach, right? Not like loosening some of the strings that we had on insurance, right? So it sounds like now we might even have some more talking about play, right? You might even have some more room to play now too.
Yeah.
Right? And so I'm really glad that you're here to join us today to talk about the work that you do with kids in this unique way, because the conversations that I've had in the past, right, is that the availability of therapy services for children can be a bit limited. And so being that you have a full caseload of kiddo clients, right, and that they have access to these services, A, is a wonderful thing, and B, I'm looking forward to diving into your approach and working with kids.
Yeah, it's actually really cool that we get to do this. Honestly, I've had to craft my approach because initially when I first got kids, there was no handbook, nothing. And I scoured the internet back and forth, and the tools were for adults, teenagers. I think my youngest at one time was like 2.5, I believe, 2.5, 3. So I got half of my caseload is like really, really young ones. And then especially out where I live, for a bit of context, I'm 50 minutes from Yosemite. Yosemite from my house is 50 minutes.
Really? Holy crap.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. So out there's nothing, no child therapist. I mean, you get them through Kaiser or Sutter, right? Or these other insurances, but out there's not much. And those that are there, success rates aren't that high because they're using traditional, I'm going to put quotes around that, traditional approaches. Whereas I've had to be very crafty with my way to kids, I guess.
And so, had you always had this natural inclination of working with kids and then cool, now I get to finally do this? Or was it just something that you kind of stumbled upon and found out that you actually enjoyed?
I've always been good with kids for the most part. It's just been something, my whole life people have been telling me, oh, you're really good with kids. And it was always at birthday parties, right? Or gatherings, family gatherings, whatnot. Even certain social events. For some reason, the kids would just gravitate towards me. No idea why. It's one of those weird life things. But and then as I dove further into my career, I realized there's this big gap, this big knowledge gap, where knowledge exists for adults, teenagers, older adults, all ranges. Just there's nothing for kids. There's not much there. Even I can't tell you the amount of times, heck, today where parents have come in and be like, I don't know how to work with my kid, and I've been scouring the internet for stuff, and there's not much stuff, and it's often the simple things that I find myself psychoeducating parents on.
Nice. Yeah, I know like when I was embarking upon this licensure
Mhm.
path, right? And before I started curriculum, I was thinking about the aspect of working with kids is that maybe kind of introducing them to this kind of like awareness of what might be going on with them, right? To kind of like,
Mhm.
maybe even like they can learn some things about coping skills and things like
Mhm.
this and whatnot
Yeah.
at an earlier age so that maybe they have that opportunity to
Yeah.
kind of like intervene earlier on instead of before things maybe
Yeah.
kind of blow up later on in life. So that was kind of my original thought. But what was your thought around what interested you? I know
Yeah.
you said kind of like this natural
Yeah.
gravitation towards kids, but
Yeah.
was there something else there
It's
that maybe piqued your interest?
it was probably my own childhood traumas. I think a lot of it was my own childhood traumas. Um, like especially growing up, because I mean, for the longest time it was just my sister and I. And the stuff that we saw, the stuff that we faced, and plus I come from an Asian family. And so like mental health, Asian families, it's not as openly talked about. It's kind of seen as taboo actually.
Right, right.
Even this whole idea of like of you're a therapist, right? Even I mean, my parents are very like they're very like well Western in that idea. My parents are very like amazed by it, but it's like other parts of the culture aren't as accepting. So for me, a lot of it was like, what could I do to challenge that? And even nowadays, anywhere I go, I get this all the time at gatherings where people just look at me different, just because I was like, because I know my experience and I know a lot of other people, kids, children, right, or like people who've had stuff as kids happen, especially in my culture, like it's very much needed and not as talked about. I guess that's one thing I find myself often like capitalizing on is just my cultural background.
Yeah, awesome. So your own background and also, like you said, kind of like
Hmm.
identifying that gap and the
Hmm.
need for the services too. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's awesome, man. So yeah, so let's kind of like think about like kind of what is your approach? I know you said like you do like play therapy and
Mhm.
comedy therapy. Super interested in that. And so
That's a new one.
yeah, yeah, I'm really interested in hearing about that. And so obviously with psychotherapy,
Hmm.
right? I mean with play therapy,
Hmm.
right? It's a form of psychotherapy using toys and
Yeah.
art, things like this. So, what's your experience with using play therapy and working with kiddos?
Ooh. Um, that that a very deep one because I could go on and on and on about the depthness of play therapy. Although I think I'm gonna go with unconventional as my approach. I think that's one thing I realized in working with kids is like the more I dove into working with kids, the more I realized conventional approaches aren't gonna work. Especially like because again, we could provide them like the worksheets, right? Or like at least how CBT has it. We can provide them the worksheets and this and that. Also, they're kids. Their brains work very differently. Even the same emotions that we feel are very different for the young ones. And so in my exploration of like what works and what doesn't work, a lot of it was trial and error. So much of it was trial and error. Where then at some point I found because initially I started with the traditional stuff. Then I was like, you know what? In order to help them better handle life challenges, we got to recreate versions of those life challenges in session. So that's where I stumbled
Right,
upon.
exactly. Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
because like if they can, and the way I kind of structured it, which I'll get into, but if they can best session, I don't know if that's the best way to put it, but if they can make it work in session, they will be wonderful in the real world. More so because I'm guessing we do this too, but like I've kind of figured out the more I do play therapy, where all the buttons lie, kind of like the scene from Inside Out where all the buttons are, and then
Uh-huh.
you push and poke every single one of the buttons, which is one of the key definitions of the play therapy, at least the one that I do, where it's like it's a lot of button pushing. And this idea of like cursification, where I'll take a game, completely mess with the rules, completely what I call cursify it, so it becomes outrageously more difficult. Or I'll make it unfair, totally on purpose, and to essentially challenge them repeatedly. I mean, and a lot of it is like frustration tolerance. So much of it is frustration tolerance and
Yeah, that's
emotions.
what it sounds like. Yeah.
Yeah. For example, I think one of my favorite examples is Uno. Uno, we've all played Uno. It's a very fun
Yes.
game.
Yes.
I stumbled upon what I call the Uno of Doom. There's Uno of Doom and there's Cursed Uno. So I took the regular Uno deck and I bought three of no, four of them. Combined them into one mega deck. I'm not joking, that thing is about that big.
My God, that is a mega deck.
It's got blank cards, it's got plus 10 cards, plus 20 cards, it's got whatever you could imagine is in there. Only two rules are with the blank card. You can't say I play the blank card and I win the game. You can't do that. And you can't say I play the blank card and blank cards don't work for anybody else but me. You can't do that either. And so, but everything else is on the table. Almost everything else. And so,
Will they ever come back to you and like say, okay, well, I don't like that rule, but what about this rule? Like, do they ever like try to like
uh-huh,
collaborate with you on like joint decision on those rules?
they do. And what's interesting is the more I do these games, the more they want the games. So many of my young ones have like added worse rules than I would have added. Like,
Wow,
like
wow,
they
they're
up
really
the ante just
hardcore.
yeah. And then I'm like, well, so then we explored of like, why did we add this particular rule? And then they're like, well, the last rule we added, I learned so and so and so. And then eventually parents will come to me and be like, yeah, my kid is now helping their friends with that exact same skill, or is
Oh
teaching others in
yeah,
their
uh-huh.
class, or like, or they're like, well, I was able to handle this situation because we had that one rule in that one game.
Nice, nice. So yeah,
Yeah.
so getting them actually like engaged, right?
Hmm.
And then being a part of the process, right? And
Hmm.
that's what we like to think about within the therapeutic setting is letting them the client be able to kind of practice what we're talking about, and then you take it out to the real world and try to
Yeah.
apply it.
Yeah, it's a lot of like recreating those life circumstances. And I mean, and I explained this to parents in the very initial diagnostic sessions that we do. I
Uh-huh.
always explain it to them of like, hey, my approach is very unconventional. I'm weird, I'm goofy, I'm silly. At one point you're gonna have the thought, what is Shivvy doing? Is he good, bro? And everything I do, and then I'll elaborate further and be like, well, everything I do is intentional. Everything is on purpose, is on design. If we will have that question, but just know that it's completely intentional.
Yes, exactly. And that's what I was thinking. Like when you said frustration tolerance, right? I was
Mhm.
thinking, okay, well, there's intent behind this, which in one example is frustration tolerance. Do you have examples of other intents?
Ooh, not just frustration, but even irritation, anger, sadness, a lot of these ones. And so even with these games, at least the ones we have in office, I've kind of categorized them on certain levels. They're all like level based. Depending on what emotion and what level we're working on, we'll do different games, and I'll bend the rules for each game differently. So like for irritation and frustration, I kind of combine together, where
Sure.
like it'll start with something simple, maybe like a Connect Four, and then maybe we'll up the ante to Sorry, and then eventually we get to Jumanji. Eventually we get to Uno, and then Uno of Doom, and then there's Monopoly. Monopoly is one of the highest tiers. We've played Monopoly. It's
So Maslow's hierarchy of gameplay therapy.
kind of literally, um, which and it's the goofiest idea. I mean, comedy is also in the fold, which I'll get to. It's the goofiest idea, but I've found it really forces young ones to like think outside the box, especially nowadays with the rise of technology and how a lot of my young ones are so video game technology focused, where it's like
Yes. Yep.
really forcing them to think outside the box. Chess is on the list, but chess is for a different emotion, obviously. Chess, checkers, even some of the more traditional ones, the ones which I can't bend the rules for. Can't really bend the rules of chess because
No,
as
you
chess.
can't. Yeah, yeah. So you have kind of like these tiers
Mhm,
of games, if you will, right?
mhm,
It sounds like you've had some like hands-on practice
mhm,
on adapting certain games and rules towards like
mhm.
I was even think of like intent, right? Towards certain levels
Yeah.
of intent. I was even thinking kind of like impulse control too.
So much impulse control, especially with games like Sorry, or with games like, well, Sorry, Chess, and Jumanji. Um,
Okay, so walk me through it. So you guys make up the rules, right? And
uh-huh.
then you're playing along, right? And then there's an incident of kind of frustration, right?
Uh-huh.
That the client might experience, right?
Uh-huh.
And then where do you go from there?
Usually at that point, that's where we take a pause, and then I'll usually have like I'll have a certain like I pick an object and we'll call it the pause object or the chill object, right? And then so usually at that point, one of the first things I turn to is sensory needs, especially for frustration and regulation of frustration for young ones. I found a lot of it is sensory based to help them deregulate.
Uh-huh.
Because like as adults, we're able to do the same sensory skill, but we can use fourth dimensional thinking to help ourselves. Kids don't have that ability yet. Their brains have
Correct.
not matured yet.
Right.
So I turn to sensory needs. So for example, like in my office, I have like these two massive fur pillows. Best, I don't know who purchased the pillows, but good on them because I'll be like, let's focus on the sensation of the pillow, or I'll run through some guided imagery with them or some mindfulness with them of like, what is our body actually feeling? Where do we feel that irritation, frustration? And if we had to describe it as a color, what color would it be? And I'll run through that
Right. Right.
track line with them. And I've kind of found helping them visualize it tends to help identify where it's coming from. And more than often, it's actually coming from somewhere else. There's a bigger, what I call urn of emotions, where the frustration from the games is often coming from something else. And usually it's at that point, I mean, it takes quite a few sessions to build up to that. But when they do,
Sure.
clients will open up about other things that are actually bothering them. Right. And so if they do, we'll keep talking about what's bothering them. It's like it also works out as a good transition thing, and eventually, I mean, it's led to a lot of like deep trauma discussions with a lot of my young ones, especially because, and one thing I'll often do is like, then we'll put an identifier on the feeling, after we've done the mindfulness to get them to help them regulate. I'll often do one of two things. Hey, this is what this feeling is called. So next time we feel this, let's mention this. So now we know what it feels like. And then
And they
also,
can expand on that vocabulary of emotions, right?
exactly.
Instead of just happy or angry, right? There's a lot in between,
Yeah.
right? So expanding on the
Yeah.
vocabulary. Uh-huh.
Yeah. And I'll even provide parents like to help parents work with their kids, right? I'll provide parents with like a little like worksheet usually, right? It's either like a worksheet or like the the wheel of emotions.
The wheel of emotions, yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I'll provide them with the wheel of emotions, and I've modified it ever so slightly to include. There's different versions. I've made Pokemon versions. There's one that has different pictures of sheep. It's for my
You made
youngest
it your
ones.
own? You modified your
Yeah.
own
Uh-huh.
versions?
I don't know if we've ever
Okay,
gone
I have
Googling
to see
for
this.
angry sheep faces. Oof, it's a whole side of the internet for angry sheep faces.
I have to see this.
It's I think one of my Pokemon one is the one that's the most popular amongst young ones. So then they can and then oftentimes some of them will connect it to like the different Pokemon. So then like next, let's say
So
there's
are
an
you
incident.
like, I'm a very visual person. So are you like sitting at home, like literally like tweaking with the emotions wheel, like coming up with different
Yeah.
faces and stuff?
Yeah. Yeah, and like I think so for a bit of a comedic context. So back in August, I went to visit my fiance. So I was just like making one of those. I had a bit of downtime. I was just making one of those. She walks in, exact words. Are we allowed to swear on this podcast? Are we allowed to use language?
Yes, yes, we
Okay.
can. Yes.
Because she walks in and sees me tweaking that. She goes, "What the fuck are you doing with the giraffe? Why are you ruining the giraffes?" I was like, "Honey, I gotta make an emotions wheel." But it works. Like it's the goofiest thing, but it works. And so that's where touching on comedy, that's how I also incorporate comedy into the fold. Comedy and dad jokes also are part of the play
Oh,
therapy
I
list
love
of.
dad jokes, dude. I made my own dad joke calendar. Did I tell you that?
Really?
Yeah, like a couple of
Oh,
years ago. Yeah, I did
yeah,
my own drawings and everything for the
yeah.
calendar. Yeah.
Oh, I gotta say this because I've that awkward moment where you go to look up dad jokes. All the websites on the first three pages of Google are in purple, and you're like, "Yeah, I've been on all of them," because you've been on dad jokes. Yeah.
Right. Wait, no, dude, look, I have my own like dad jokes deck of cards.
No way. Okay, I
Yeah.
gotta make
Someone gifted
this.
this.
That I will. Props for that. That's probably one of the coolest things I've seen.
I found a couple of good ones in here too. It's um let's see if I can find one. Um why did Nose not want to go to school?
I don't know. Why did Nose not want to go to school?
Because he was tired of getting picked on.
I think I've done a different version with with one of my 4-year olds a couple days ago. It takes them a second usually, but when they get it, there's three reactions I get. Either I get they'll laugh, or I'll get the Shivvy, are you for real? or I'll get the and the youngest ones will do like the weird like hand thing and will just like look at me while the parents are just like cracking up in session of um and I've perfected a list of the most frustrating ones, cringy
Oh, you
ones.
have.
Oh, it took me a while, but that's another frustration tolerance tool I use where for telehealth sessions, right? If ever the internet's not working, we can't do games or we can't do other things. I have a list of dad jokes. They are called the list of outrageous dad jokes that'll make you outrageously cringe. Exact title, by the way. And it's like really, really bad ones. Half of it is all why did the chicken cross the road jokes.
Yeah, just like so bad. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
where it's like, and it builds the frustration, and there's I've created tears with that as well. Um, Although I'm a little iffy about the dark humor ones, where I'm very picky with those, especially because dark humor.
Yeah. Yeah. It gotta be age appropriate, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
especially we can't
Yeah.
use every joke for every kid.
No, no. And some of them, like you said, like some of them, it's like the kind, are they actually going to get this? Right. Like, yeah, yeah.
It's
But,
very awkward crickets when they don't get it, and you're like,
exactly. But no, I like it too, because I mean, getting kids to engage in play therapy, I think being adults and we get to do play therapy too is awesome, right? Because we get
yeah,
to tap into that part of
yeah,
ourselves as well. But also to your point around working with kiddos that come from a trauma history, right? Maybe they've had to stuff down that
mhm,
urge to want to play, right?
yeah,
And so being able to re-engage them in that and say, hey, we don't have to take ourselves so seriously,
yeah,
right? Like it is okay to just kind of like let
yeah.
loose and play.
Yeah, and especially and oftentimes and that's where like the connotation with therapy and especially with child therapists is I think that's where there's a lot of like gap in the knowledge as well and in the system. I call it the system. It just helps my ADHD, my own ADHD
Fair,
brain
fair.
is like this is this idea of like where we have to do something as therapists with our young ones. And oftentimes the thing I've found works the most is that open space. I can't mention the amount of like I mean I have like a whole like ancient like scrolls worth of like how many clients where only thing I've done is created that safe place for them, created that safe, open, welcoming environment. And initially it does nothing. Initially, even parents are like, what's happening? And oftentimes that's all they really need, like a place where they can be a kid again. I mean, it changes their world, especially for the young ones. What's interesting is I've done it with adults too. Adults usually give me the, are you kidding me? And then I'm like, well, let's give it a try. Yeah, I'll capitalize on some expertise language usually, but and even for adults, where like the minute they allow themselves to be a kid again, and that's right, like I mean, it changes everything, even their approach to things. Uh,
Yeah, because it has an impact on the central nervous system, right?
mm-hmm,
Yeah,
mm-hmm,
yeah, and I'm glad that you brought up the part about feeling the creating the safe space when we're working with kids. Because as I was reading your bio, like that was one of the first things I was thinking of is like how we create a safe space for them. And oftentimes
yeah,
the client therapist relationship in can generally be stated as a
yeah,
unique one, right? Because
yeah,
oftentimes people come and they talk about things that normally they may not
yeah,
talk about with other people, but also the way that they're interacted with might be different from the when in
yeah,
the rest of their lives too. So being
yeah.
able to kind of create that safe space for them in that way, like you said, it can go a long
Yeah.
way.
And especially like allowing like and that's one thing I do all the time with all my young ones is I purposefully like I have this like kid persona where kid Shivvy he is he's a lovely guy, although the klutziness there's a bit of a thing
Kid
with
Chivi's
klutziness.
klutzy.
Oh my God, he runs into everything. Literally everything. At some point, I'm like, oh, that's a new injury. Like, it's and it's part of the whole persona of like, especially with young ones, because they're very silly. It's very fun in games and rainbows and butterflies. And some of the best approaches I've done is where, I've let myself fall into the butterflies, fall into the being a kid and being being the silly, goofy. And so even in my approach to create that environment, I'll be sillier than them. One of my favorite activities of all time is this idea of this maze. So I do it. I think I did it Yes, 2 days ago. I did it 2 days ago with one of my private pay clients, and where we essentially make a map. The map cannot be correct. It has to lead to the wrong spot. That's the condition. It's got to lead. The goal is to win. You got to get the teddy bear. But the catch is the map should not lead us to the teddy bear, and you can make it as goofy as you want. And so oftentimes the kiddos will like scribble and draw loop-de-loops and all sorts of spiralies. And so when I'm following the map, I'll like actually do the loop-de-loops and spiralies, which often leads me to
Uh-huh.
walking into walls and corners and walking into corners and then and then oh no, there's a big lava trap right there. So then you got to fall into the
The
lava
floor
trap.
is lava. Yeah.
Yeah, and like do the song and dance with them, and it kind of like, because I feel like a lot of grown-ups, especially in other parts of the kids' lives, it's very serious. There's a lot of adult stuff, so
Yeah,
one
exactly.
even 1 hour a day, 1 hour a week, like where a grown-up's being a kid with them changes their world.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for tuning in this week. Be sure to check out our next episode where we continue our discussion with Shivvy to explore the urn of emotions, catastrophizing and personification, misbehavior as symptoms, and a little something called the brain highway. Thanks for tuning in this week. If this conversation resonated with you, follow Now Serving a Site of Therapy on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen. Be sure to click subscribe and leave a comment and share with others who may also enjoy. Check out our website at izzotherapy.com, where you can contact us to be placed with a therapist who's the best fit for you.